So you're getting into Deadside and looking for a good guide to get you started. Well, you've come to the right place. I will try my best to keep this video short and sweet. We're going to be going through things extremely quickly if you can't already tell, so feel free to pause the video if you need to. This video will also be divided up into chapters, so feel free to skip around. Right then, let's get started. Before we even launch the game, if you have a graphics card of at least a 20 series or higher, I recommend running the game in DirectX 12. It will give your game a significant FPS boost. However, this will cause a bit more instability, so it's possible you might get some crashes because of this feature. If that trade-off is worth it for you, then open up your Steam library, right-click on Deadside, hit Properties, and where it says Launch Options, type in -D3D12. That's it. Now whenever you launch the game, you'll be running in DirectX 12. Okay, so we can actually launch the game now. Next thing we're going to do is find a server to play on. There are a few things to consider here. First is official versus community servers. Official servers are pretty much the default, however they have no moderation at all, so anything goes there. Then we have first and third person servers. Personally, I prefer to play on first person only servers, but again, that's just personal preference. And then we have PvE and PvP servers. And I highly recommend you play on PvP servers even if you're brand new to the game. It's the way the game is designed to be played, so you're going to have a better experience overall, even if you do get killed by other players a bit while you're learning. Those are just the main things. There are a lot more options to consider when playing on community servers, like boosted loot, squad limits, things like that. I run a server of my own, it's where I play on, it's first person only, it's got default loot, it's got a squad limit of 3, and it's decently populated, and I enjoy the community there a lot, so it is my top recommendation, of course. So after you find a server to play on, it's time to load in. I would take this time to get familiar with the UI and controls. Most of it's pretty standard, so I'm not going to talk about much. Press tab to open up your inventory, it's really not that complicated. I'm sure you're familiar with this style of UI from other games, so I won't talk about too much here. The important thing to note really is the crafting tab on the top left, and the ground tab. The ground tab shows items on the ground in proximity to you, and the crafting tab shows a list of all the items that you can craft. While we're talking about controls, this game has an auto-run function which is bound to V by default. It also has VoIP, the push-to-talk key is bound to F6 by default. I usually rebind these two, and I'm pretty sure you're going to want to rebind those as well. Alright, let's talk about the actual game now. As a fresh spawn on a server, you have 5 main goals. These 5 goals are 1. Get a gun. 2. Get better clothing. 3. Get some meds. 4. Get some food and water. And 5. Get some money and gear. These 5 goals are most likely going to be your first few days playing the game, maybe less if you do really well in combat, but let's go through these step by step. So 1. Get a gun. Weapons in Deadside are pretty easy to find. It's not like DayZ where you have to wander around a city for 15 minutes in order to find a rifle with no mag. It's not going to be like that. Really, all you have to do in Deadside is just look around the town you spawn in at, search a few houses, and you're most likely going to find some sort of weapon there. The most common are pistols, and they will do fine when fighting the AI, but they aren't so great in PvP. Really what you want is either a Scorp or a shotgun. The shotgun is extremely good in close quarters fights. If you headshot somebody with a shotgun, it will kill any player, even if they have the best armor in the game. You just have to be close enough. Now the Scorp, or the Scorpion, doesn't have this insane one-tap potential, but it does have a much better time to kill than a pistol, so it's worth grabbing. And you will need some sort of weapon because the world of Deadside is filled with hostile AI. These AI could be compared to Tarkov's Scavs, or the Bandits and Stalker, with one key difference though that usually throws a lot of new players off. The AI in Deadside don't have any voice lines, at least not currently, so new players will often think they're being shot at by another player, when really it's just the bots. It takes a bit of time to be able to know the difference, so if you get a bit confused, don't worry, that's normal. You will also need a weapon to defend yourself against other players, of course. However, at this stage, any players you run into at these starter towns will most likely not have that much more gear than you, so it's really not a huge worry. Step 2 is get better clothing. You will most likely complete this step probably before step 1, because clothing spawns everywhere in these starter towns. They really aren't hard to find. If you do happen to kill some AI, you can take their clothes as well. You're looking for clothes that have 4 slots, not 2, since that will offer the best storage. If you do find any clothes that you don't need, tear them up into rags. You will need these rags to craft meds. You can actually use them as meds. If you don't find a backpack, you can combine these rags with a rope to make an improvised bag, and that does lead into step 3, which is meds. As you're looking for your gun and some clothes, keep your eye out for vodka, moonshine, and rubbing alcohol. These 3 items can be combined with rags to craft sterile rags. And these sterile rags heal 18 HP over time, which is pretty decent. If you don't find anything to sterilize the rags with, that's fine. Just use the normal unsterilized rags. They will heal 8 HP instead of 18. You don't have to worry about the wound getting infected or anything because it's unsterilized. The only thing you have to worry about is just how slow it's going to take to fully heal with just normal rags. Alright, so, if you found a gun, clothing, and meds, the last thing you need to find is food and water. If you spawned in with a canteen, which is included with the supporter pack, just go ahead and drink it all, and then toss it on the ground, because canteens can only be filled at water collectors, and you won't be able to craft one of those for a while. So just toss it. So then you'll need to find some canned food and canned water. These spawn around town, so you might find some if you get lucky while you're looking for a gun, but they are kind of rare. A good way to get food is to kill AI and search their pockets. Canned food and water has a decent chance to spawn there, not great though. Another great way to get food and water is in these gray crates. These are a rare spawn that are hidden around the map, so keep your eyes out for them. They usually spawn a decent gun too with some meds, so it's worth looting these even if you aren't a fresh spawn. These gray crates spawn pretty much everywhere around structures. It could be next to a car, or on top of a transformer, or just in the corner of a building. If you do happen to get unlucky and you don't find any food and water in the town you start in, you have 2 options. You can just skip this step and hope to find some in a mission later, since food doesn't drain super quickly, or you can go to a campsite. These campsites are great in the early game. They often spawn cooked duck or canned food. There's usually at least 1 gray crate spawn at these campsites as well, so it's worth visiting these if you're nearby one. On the screen I'll show a few of my favorite campsites around the map. These campsites have no markers on the map by default, so you'll have to remember these locations while playing. So at this point is the final step in these 5 goals, and that is to get some gear and money. This means going to some sort of PvE event. The best one for new players is definitely an easy mission. It's pretty simple. You go to the location marked on the map with this symbol, shoot about 10 to 15 bots, and then when they all die, a reward will spawn for you. This reward will have a gun, meds, and most importantly, money and maybe an optic. Once you get the reward, head over to a safe zone. These are marked in green. At these safe zones, there are traders and a good bit of storage that you can use for free. This storage is yours and yours alone. There's also usually other players to talk to if you have any questions or if you just want to talk to some people. You will need money to buy simple stuff in the early game like ammo for your guns and maybe even some meds if you can afford them. Eventually in the mid to late game you're going to need some cash for nails, for some meds, and maybe even to purchase some high tier items, but that's all for later. In the meantime, all you need to worry about is getting some missions completed under your belt. One thing you will have to worry about while doing these missions though is other players. It's pretty common to have multiple players show up to one mission. If they show up while you're shooting bots, they will hear you and know your position. So be very aware of your surroundings while doing a mission and listen for other gunshots that aren't aimed at you. There are a few other events you can try to do in the early game that might get you some very good gear. Cargo drops are just simple loot drops that anybody can grab. There's no AI or anything, so if one spawns near you, don't hesitate to just run over and grab everything. Usually the first person to get to the drop will be the person who gets all the gear inside. You could also try and do a medium mission, but the difficulty does get a bit harder, and there will be more bots in total to deal with. Any other event though, like an epic mission, hard mission, heli crash, or a convoy, I would not recommend going to those if you're new. These events have very difficult AI, usually very skilled players as well, and that's because they drop the best gear in the game. So, these events are very difficult, but it is high risk, high reward, I suppose. So, those are the 5 goals you will need to complete in the early stages. Just spend a while completing these and get used to how the game feels and plays. This will also allow you to have some gear stockpiled away, which you can use later for more challenging events when you're ready. There are also a few other tips I have for you, one being military AI. Now, military AI spawn pretty much everywhere around the map, in some unmarked areas, some dotted areas, and sometimes just patrolling some roads. These bots will be wearing Gorka that's green, so that's how you know it's a military bot. They will almost always be using some sort of AK and some sort of Mosin, 2 extremely good mid-tier guns. They will also usually have helmets, which is good to have, but they will sometimes rarely be wearing body armor. Now, body armor is a must-have in Deadside. If you're wearing no armor at all, any shotgun or Mosin will instantly kill you if they hit you in the chest. But even with just some basic police armor, which is the most common kind, that one tap will turn into a two tap, which is extremely valuable. So it's not a bad idea to visit these military bases. They're marked around the map here. Military AI will spawn there, and they really aren't that difficult to farm as long as you have some sort of weapon. This way you can stockpile some low tier AKs, some Mosins, and maybe even some armor. If you get lucky, you might even get a Mosin with some sort of scope, and a scoped Mosin can easily clear out heli crashes and convoys if you do it right. So don't be afraid to go explore these military spots. As long as you have at least some kind of gun, you should be okay. Well, at this point, there isn't really much left for you to do except to go into the game and learn. If you want more information, I'll link down below the game's official wiki, which I helped to write. It's got a ton of good information about events, different tools and items, and lots of things I just couldn't fit into this video. If you want to know more about the game's weapon damage, armor, and how all of that works, I have a link below to my damage spreadsheet. Both of these are very good resources to have so that you can slowly become more knowledgeable about how the game works as you're also getting in-game experience at the same time. And finally, if you want more guides like these, I have tons more on my channel covering anything and everything Deadside. If you're looking for maybe something more advanced than the absolute basics, which is what I'm talking about in this video, then go check them out. So, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Thanks for watching.